My girlfriend of 5 years said I wasn't important, so I quietly walked away. She had no idea what was coming when she uttered the words, "You're not my priority right now." The truth came out and it was too late. I'm Zane, I'm 28 years old, and my world quietly shattered on a Tuesday. It wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a simple sentence, uttered with the casual indifference one might use to decline a second helping of potatoes. My girlfriend of 5 years, the woman I thought I would build a future with, told me I wasn't her priority. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, I just said, "That's okay." Then I took all the time and energy I had been pouring into our wilting relationship and invested it somewhere else, in someone else. And when my girlfriend finally noticed, it hit her with the force of a tidal wave she never saw coming. Our story didn't begin this way. For the first 3 years, Sloan and I were the couple our friends pointed to. We were the benchmark. We met in a ridiculously cliché way, both reaching for the same obscure book on graphic design history in a dusty, sun-drenched corner of a second-hand bookshop. I was a fledgling freelance designer, and she was in her final year of pre-med, sharp, witty, and with a laugh that could make you forget your own name. Our life together was built on mutual support. I'd stay up with her, making flashcards and quizzing her on anatomical terms I couldn't pronounce, my laptop glowing beside her mountain of textbooks. In return, she was my biggest cheerleader. When I was agonizing over a logo concept, she'd sit with me, not offering design advice but simply being present, making sure I ate and reminding me to believe in my own talent. We were a team. Our tiny apartment was a haven filled with the smell of her favorite jasmine tea and the constant, quiet hum of my computer. We dreamed of a future where she would be a respected doctor and I would have my own small design agency. We were going to take on the world together. Then 2 years ago, she was accepted into a highly competitive medical residency program at the city's most prestigious hospital. I was immensely proud. We celebrated with a fancy dinner, toasting with champagne as she spoke, her eyes glittering with excitement about the journey ahead. We knew it would be hard. We knew the hours would be brutal. What we didn't know was that our team of two was about to be dissolved, and I would be relegated to the role of a forgotten benchwarmer. The change was insidious, a slow erosion rather than a sudden crack. It started with canceled plans. The first major blow was our fourth anniversary. I had made reservations months in advance at the very same Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. I remembered how she'd laughed, her nose dusted with powdered sugar from the cannoli, and I wanted to recapture that magic. The day of, I got a text message an hour before we were supposed to meet. "So sorry, have to cancel tonight. Dr. Albright invited some of us residents out for drinks. Huge networking opportunity. Rain check." I stared at the message, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. I had already put on the new shirt I'd bought for the occasion. A knot of disappointment tightened in my stomach. I texted back, "Of course, have fun." I didn't tell her that rain check was becoming her most used word. I went to the restaurant anyway. Sitting alone at a table for two, I ordered the same pasta we'd shared, the empty chair across from me a silent testament to my new reality. I told the waiter my date had been held up at the hospital, a half-truth that felt like a shield for my pride. Erosion continued, chipping away at the foundation of our relationship. My 28th birthday arrived a few months later. I wasn't a big birthday person. I didn't want a surprise party or a lavish gift. All I wanted was a quiet night in with Sloan, just us, a movie, and maybe a pizza. I'd been feeling like a ghost in our apartment for weeks, and I just wanted to feel seen by her. She swore she would be home early. I blocked it out in my calendar, Zane, I promise, 7 p.m. sharp. What? At 7, I had the pizza ordered and our favorite movie paused on the screen. At 8, the pizza was getting cold. At 9, I ate 2 slices by myself. At 10, I gave up and started cleaning the kitchen. At half past midnight, the door finally clicked open. Sloan shuffled in, her shoulders slumped, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She dropped her bag on the floor and looked at me, her eyes clouded with fatigue. "Long day?" I asked, my voice flat. She nodded, running a hand through her hair. "You have no idea." She walked into the kitchen for a glass of water and stopped dead. Her eyes landed on the single, slightly sad-looking cupcake I had bought from the bakery down the street, a lone candle sticking out of its chocolate frosting. I had been about to light it when 10 o'clock rolled around. Her face fell, a flicker of memory, of recognition. "Oh, Zane," she whispered. "I am so sorry, your birthday, it completely slipped my mind." The apology was there, but it was a ghost of one, thin and stretched by her overwhelming fatigue. It was perfunctory, the apology of a busy person to a minor inconvenience. I just nodded. "It's okay, you're tired, get some sleep." He didn't argue, I didn't press it. The hurt was a cold, smooth stone in my gut. I felt more like her landlord than her partner, the person who made sure the lights stayed on and the fridge had milk. The reciprocity was gone. A few weeks after that, I won the biggest contract of my freelance career, a complete rebranding for a well-known tech startup. It was a game changer, the kind of project that could lead to the agency I dreamed of. I was buzzing with excitement, my hands practically shaking as I called her. "Sloan, you won't believe what just happened," I began, launching into the details. "Oh, that's great, honey," she said, but her voice was a million miles away. Before I could even finish explaining the scope of the project, she cut in. Listen, I'm glad, but I'm having a nightmare of a day. We had a patient code, it was awful, and Dr. Albright is questioning every decision I made. The conversation immediately pivoted, my career-defining moment shrinking into insignificance, overshadowed by the gravity of her world. I listened for 20 minutes as she detailed her stress, my own good news dissolving into a forgotten footnote. I hung up the phone not feeling like a successful designer but like a free-of-charge therapist. The person I wanted to celebrate with most hadn't even heard me. I was just a voice on the other end of the line, a receptacle for her stress. The team was well and truly gone. I was just a spectator to the Sloan show, and frankly, I was getting tired of watching. The weeks that followed were steeped in a thick, permeating loneliness. It was a strange kind of quiet. The apartment wasn't silent, Sloan was often there physically, a presence in the corner of my eye. But the space she occupied was surrounded by an invisible, soundproof wall built of medical jargon, fatigue, and single-minded ambition. She'd be at the kitchen table, her laptop open, surrounded by a fortress of medical journals, her brow furrowed in concentration. The air around her was so dense with focus that it felt like an intrusion to even ask if she wanted a cup of tea. I started to feel like a piece of furniture in the home we had built together. I was the comfortable armchair, the reliable lamp, part of the scenery, but not actively engaged with. Our conversations became a series of logistical exchanges. Did you pick up the dry cleaning? I'll be late tonight. We're out of coffee. The woman who used to ask me about the intricate details of my design projects, who debated the merits of a serif versus a sans serif font with playful intensity, was gone. In her place was a roommate who paid her half of the rent on time. The weight of it all began to press down on me. It was a physical ache in my chest, a hollowness that even my busiest workdays couldn't fill. I missed her. I missed her laugh, her terrible puns, her hand slipping into mine as we walked down the street. I missed being a we. I decided I had to try one more time, not a grand gesture, not a desperate ultimatum, just a clear, simple plea for connection. I looked at her hospital schedule, which was taped to the fridge, a complex grid of shifts and on-calls that looked more like a battle plan than a calendar. I found it, a Tuesday 2 weeks away, with a single, beautiful word next to it: off. It felt like a beacon of hope, a whole day. I wasn't greedy, I would just take an evening. I began to plan it like a secret mission. I would cook her favorite meal, chicken piccata with lemon and capers. I'd buy a bottle of the crisp Sauvignon Blanc she loved. No restaurant, no pressure to be on for anyone else. Just us in our home, with the rule that for 3 hours there would be no talk of hospital politics, no checking emails, no reviewing patient charts. The day arrived and I spent the afternoon cleaning. I tidied up the living room, put away the stray stacks of mail, and even lit a few candles, hoping the soft light would create a pocket of peace for her to walk into. I wanted to strip away all the stress of the outside world and remind us of the sanctuary we used to be for each other. She came home around 6, looking as drained as ever. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door and gave me a tired smile. "Hey," she said, her voice raspy. "Hey you," I replied, trying to keep my own tone light and hopeful. "Go get comfortable, I'm handling dinner tonight." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she didn't object. She disappeared into the bedroom and emerged a few minutes later in sweats and a faded t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She sank onto the couch and picked up her phone, her thumb immediately beginning its mindless scroll. I let her decompress for a few minutes before I approached, sitting on the ottoman across from her. "So," I began gently, "I was hoping we could have a ray. All evening tonight, just us." She looked up from her phone, her eyes still clouded with the day's events. "Okay." "I miss you, Sloan," I said, the words feeling raw and overly sincere in the quiet room. "I feel like I haven't really seen you in months. I was hoping that tonight we could just be us. No work talk, no phones, just for a little while. I'm making your favorite." I watched her face, searching for a sign of the old Sloan, for the warmth to return to her eyes. Instead, a subtle tension creased her brow. She looked from me to the kitchen, then back again, and I could practically see the mental calculation happening, the weighing of my request against her mountain of responsibilities and her bone-deep exhaustion. And then she said it, the sentence that would become the clear dividing line between the life I was fighting for and the one I would end up living. "Zane, I appreciate the thought, I really do," she said, her voice devoid of any malice, which somehow made it worse. It was the voice of pure, unadulterated pragmatism. "But you're not my priority right now." The words hung in the air between us, stark and terribly clear. "You're not my priority, not I'm too tired. Not can we do this another time." It was a statement of fact, a declaration of my place in her life. I was a task she couldn't get to, a meeting she had to postpone indefinitely. In that moment, something inside me didn't break. It clicked into place. It was the cold, quiet click of a lock, the final tumblers falling into alignment, the desperate hope I had been clinging to, the fight I had been fighting alone. It all just evaporated. All that was left was a profound and hollow calm. The battle was over because it had never really been a battle. I had been trying to resuscitate something that was already gone. I looked at this woman who was a stranger in my girlfriend's skin, and I gave her a small, genuine nod. That's okay, I said, and the strangest part was I meant it with every fiber of my being. It was okay. It was okay for her to have her priorities, and it was okay for me to finally stop asking to be one of them. She seemed relieved by my easy acceptance, as if I'd just saved her the trouble of a long, emotional argument. She gave me a grateful little smile and her attention dropped back to the glowing screen in her hand. Thanks for understanding, she murmured. I stood up from the ottoman. No problem, I said. I walked into the kitchen, turned off the stove, and put the uncooked chicken back into the refrigerator. I blew out the candles one by one until the room was plunged back into its usual sterile light. Then I grabbed my jacket and walked out the door into the cool night air, leaving her scrolling on the couch in silence. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew with absolute certainty that I was walking away from the life where I was an afterthought. I walked for hours that night, the city lights blurring into long streaks as cars rushed past. I wasn't angry, not anymore. The fiery frustration had been doused by Sloane's words, leaving behind a cold, clear certainty. You can't make someone value your time, you can't beg for a space in their life. Her priorities were set. She had handed me a permission slip to find my own. I came back to the apartment late, well after she was asleep. The next morning was quiet. We moved around each other with the practiced avoidance of two people who knew something fundamental had shifted. The air was thick with unspoken words. I made coffee, she toasted a bagel, and we left for our respective days without so much as a meaningful glance. The hollowness from the night before was still there, but it felt different now. It wasn't the ache of longing, it was the quiet emptiness of a space that has been cleared out, waiting for something new to be put in its place. I sat at my desk, staring at a design brief, but my mind was blank. My own priority for so long had been trying to salvage my relationship. Without that, what was I supposed to focus my energy on? The answer came in the form of a phone call around lunchtime. It was my younger sister, Paige. Her voice was thick with unshed tears, and I immediately sat upright, my professional numbness vanishing. Zane, do you have a minute? She asked, her attempt at a normal tone failing completely. Paige, what's wrong? You sound awful. A choked sob came through the receiver. The loan, she managed to get out. The bank denied my small business loan. They said my plan was underdeveloped and my financial projections were too optimistic. I put everything into this, Zane. I don't know what to do. Maybe this was just a stupid dream. Paige's dream was to open a small artisanal bakery and cafe. For the past year, she had been pouring her heart, soul, and every cent of her savings into it. She perfected her recipes, scouted locations, and worked tirelessly on a business plan. Hearing the despair in her voice, the sound of her dream crumbling before it had even begun, sparked something in me. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The fierce, urgent desire to help someone who actually wanted it. Don't you dare say it's a stupid dream, I said, my voice firm with a purpose that had been absent for months. It's a brilliant dream, so the bank said no. The bank is run by people in suits who probably eat stale donuts. We don't need them. Where are you? I'm at my apartment, she sniffled. Stay there, I'm coming over. We're going to fix this. I packed up my laptop, sent a quick email to a client pushing a deadline, and left. I didn't text Sloane to let her know where I was going. There was no need. I wasn't her priority. She didn't need to be kept appraised of my movements. When I got to Paige's apartment, she was sitting on her floor surrounded by a chaotic storm of paperwork, her face pale and tear-streaked. I walked in, knelt, and started gathering the scattered papers into a neat pile. Okay, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Let's see what these soulless number crunchers had to say. We spent the rest of the day and the entire weekend huddled in her small living room. It was transformative. I took her business plan, which was full of heart but lacked professional polish, and I attacked it with the focus of a designer on a mission. Your ideas are all here, Paige, I explained, pointing to her handwritten notes. But we need to make them see it. We need to sell the dream, not just the numbers. My skills, which had felt so undervalued and peripheral in my own home, were suddenly essential. I redesigned her entire proposal from the ground up. I created a stunning professional logo for the rolling pin, a warm, rustic design that perfectly captured the spirit of her bakery. I designed mock-ups of her menus, her packaging for pastries, and even the loyalty cards. I built spreadsheets with financial projections that were ambitious, but grounded in solid research of the local market, which we did together. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I was part of a team. We bounced ideas off each other, the energy in the room crackling with creativity and shared purpose. Paige's despair slowly melted away, replaced by a cautious, then growing excitement. She would bake us cookies and we'd sit there, covered in a light dusting of flour, brainstorming names for her signature cupcakes. She listened to my input, not with the distracted air of someone doing me a favor, but with the focused attention of a true partner. My contributions weren't just helpful, they were valued. They were critical. I felt seen, I felt essential. The hollow space inside me began to fill up, not with the ghosts of a past love, but with the solid, satisfying feeling of building something real. I finally stumbled back to my own apartment late Sunday night, physically exhausted but mentally energized in a way I hadn't been in years. Sloane was on the couch, laptop on her lap, a familiar scene. She looked up as I came in. "Hey," she said, "long weekend." "Yeah," I replied, a genuine smile on my face. I was helping Paige. Her loan fell through, so we've been revamping her entire business plan. I think we're onto something really great. I waited, a small, unconscious part of me still hoping she'd ask a follow-up question, that she'd show a spark of interest. She just hummed an acknowledgement, her eyes already drifting back to her screen. "That's nice," she said absently. And that was it. No, how is she doing? No, what did you work on? Nothing. My weekend of purpose, of connection, of rebuilding my sister's dream from the ashes was dismissed with 2 syllables. It didn't even hurt this time, it was just information. It was the final confirmation I needed. My priorities had a new home now. The decision wasn't a dramatic, sweeping gesture. It was a quiet, internal realignment. I stopped looking at Sloane's schedule on the fridge as a puzzle to be solved. I stopped holding my breath on Tuesdays, hoping her day off would magically materialize into quality time. My life was no longer on standby, waiting for her to grant me an audience. My priority was Paige. My project was the rolling pin. My days took on a new rhythm. I'd finish my freelance design work by the late afternoon, driven by a new efficiency. Then my real work would begin. Paige and I became a whirlwind of focused energy. We decided to bypass the big banks altogether and looked into local grants for new female-owned businesses and community-based crowdfunding. My redesigned proposal, complete with the professional branding and solid financial plans, was a world away from her original application. It was compelling, it was professional, and it worked. A local community development fund saw the potential and approved a modest grant, not as much as the bank loan, but it was enough. It was a start. With the funding secured, we found a small, slightly run-down storefront for rent in a charming up-and-coming neighborhood. The rent was affordable precisely because the place needed a lot of work. To me, that wasn't a problem, it was an opportunity. I had spent so much of my energy trying to patch up the invisible cracks in my relationship. It felt incredible to pour that same energy into something tangible, something that could be fixed with a fresh coat of paint and some hard work. My weekends were no longer empty stretches of time spent waiting. They were filled with the smell of sawdust and primer. I learned how to patch drywall. I spent hours on a ladder, carefully painting the walls in a warm, creamy white that would make the space feel bright and welcoming. I built rustic wooden shelves to display Paige's future creations. We de-work all day, fueled by cheap pizza and limitless enthusiasm, our laughter echoing in the empty space that was slowly transforming into a dream. These were the moments that stitched my frayed spirit back together. I remember the day the main oven was delivered and installed. After the technicians left, Paige and I just stood there, staring at it like it was a grand monument. That evening, she brought ingredients and we baked the first loaf of sourdough in it. When it came out, the crust a perfect, deep golden brown, we just looked at each other and grinned. We tore off pieces with our hands, the steam warming our faces. It was the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. It tasted like victory. Another day, the sign I had designed was installed above the front door. The rolling pin, it read, in a beautiful flowing script against a dark green background. Seeing my design, my work made manifest in the real world, representing my sister's future, filled me with a pride so profound it almost made me dizzy. We didn't go out for a fancy celebration. We just sat on the floor of the half-finished shop with a couple of beers, planning our next steps. That quiet moment of shared accomplishment was more intimate and fulfilling than any raincheck anniversary dinner could ever have been. Meanwhile, back at the apartment, the emotional distance between Sloane and me stretched into a vast, unbridgeable canyon. She was vaguely aware that I was busy helping Paige with her bakery thing. I think on some level she was relieved. My new project meant I was no longer looking to her to fill my time. My absence was a convenience. It freed her up to focus completely on her own priorities without the pesky guilt of a neglected boyfriend. Our communication dwindled into a series of functional, sterile text messages. Her long day exhausted. Me sorry to hear that, get some rest. Me heading over to Paige's to work on the shop. Her okay. There was no curiosity from her end. She never asked to see pictures of the progress. She never asked if we needed help. The bakery, the single most important and time-consuming thing in my life, was just a vague concept to her. It was Zane's little project. We were living parallel lives under the same roof. The team was a distant memory. I was no longer a spectator to her life. I was the lead actor in my own, and it was a story she had no interest in reading. And the strange thing was, I was happier than I had been in years. For Sloane, my newfound purpose was a feature, not a bug. My self-sufficiency was a welcome reprieve. It allowed her to dedicate herself to the grueling demands of her residency without the low-level hum of my disappointment in the background. She was in the most challenging and critical phase of her medical training, and in her mind, my preoccupation with Paige's Bakery was a perfect temporary solution. She believed that once the pressure at the hospital eased, once she was an attending physician, things would go back to normal. She assumed I was simply on pause waiting for her. The first sign that she had fundamentally misread the situation came on a Wednesday night. It was a unicorn of an evening, a senior doctor noticing Sloane's visible exhaustion after a brutal 36-hour shift had taken pity on her. "Go home, Sloane," he'd said. "Get a full night's sleep, that's an order." She walked into our apartment around 7 p.m., a time when she was usually still drowning in patient charts. She felt a rare sense of freedom, a lightness in her step. She expected to find me where I usually was in the evenings before the bakery project, at my desk, headphones on, immersed in a design project, but ready to drop everything the moment she walked in the door. She was looking forward to it, even. Maybe they could actually order a pizza and watch a movie. A throwback to the old days. But the apartment was empty, and it was silent, not the charged silence of an argument but the deep, settled quiet of an empty home. At first, she felt a wave of relief, a chance to just sit in the stillness and decompress without having to make conversation. She kicked off. Her shoes dropped her bag and collapsed onto the couch. An hour passed, the sun went down, the silence in the apartment began to feel less peaceful and more hollow. The quiet started to press in on her. She found herself glancing at the door every time she heard a sound in the hallway. Where was I? She pulled out her phone and sent a text. "Hey, home early tonight, a rare gift." She waited 5 minutes, 10, no reply. This was unusual. I was normally quick to respond. She started to feel a prickle of annoyance. Here she was, finally available, and I was nowhere to be found. The irony was completely lost on her. After waiting nearly an hour for a response that didn't come, she finally called me. The phone rang several times before I picked up. When I did, my voice was nearly drowned out by a cacophony of background noise, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of an espresso machine, and a buzz of happy chatter. "Hey, can't really talk right now," I yelled over the din. "It's our soft opening for friends and family. It's absolutely insane in here. Is everything okay?" The word soft opening caught her completely off guard. This was news to her. "Oh," she said, her voice small. "No, everything's fine. I got off early." Before I could respond, she heard Paige's voice shouting in the background, clear as a bell. "Zane, I need you. The new card reader is freaking out." "Gotta go, Sloane," I said, my voice rushed but energized. "Talk later." And then the line went dead. She sat on the couch, the silent phone in her hand, the echo of my hurried dismissal ringing in her ears. A strange, unfamiliar feeling began to curdle in her stomach. It was a mixture of annoyance and something else, something she couldn't quite name. It felt a little like being left out. Driven by this new, unsettling feeling, she did something she hadn't thought to do in all these months. She opened up social media and searched for the rolling pin. The page loaded and she was stunned. It wasn't a sad, amateurish page with a few blurry photos. It was a slick, professional profile buzzing with life. The logo she'd only vaguely heard about was beautiful. The photos were stunning, golden brown pastries artfully arranged, the warm, inviting interior of the shop, the gleaming espresso machine. And then she saw the pictures of me. There I was, covered in a dusting of flour, a huge, unforced grin on my face as I stood next to Paige. There was a time-lapse video of me assembling shelves, my movements quick and sure. There was a photo of me and Paige clinking beer bottles in the empty shop, our faces glowing with accomplishment. But the post that made her breath catch in her throat was from Paige, written just an hour ago. It was a picture of the two of us standing proudly in front of the new sign. The caption read, "Friends and family night is a GO. I absolutely could not have done any of this without my amazing brother and business partner Zane. He's the brains behind the brand and the heart of this whole operation. Here's to the future." Business partner. The words hit Sloane with an unexpected force. A partner, not a helper, not a supportive brother lending a hand, a partner. This wasn't some little project I was using to pass the time until she was less busy. I had built an entirely new life, a new purpose, a new partnership without her. She scrolled through months of posts, a documented history of my joy and fulfillment that she had been completely oblivious to. She looked around our silent, empty apartment. The space that she had seen as a peaceful refuge from her chaotic life suddenly felt like what it was, a place I was no longer eager to come home to. For the first time, a crack appeared in her armor of self-assured priority. She had assumed I was waiting in the wings. But the pictures made it clear, I wasn't waiting for the show to be over. I had left the theater and was starring in a whole new production down the street. And for the first time, she felt the terrifying pang of being left behind. The grand opening of the rolling pin was set for a Saturday 2 weeks later. The buzz from the soft launch had been incredible, and the entire week leading up to it was a frantic, joyful blur of preparation. Paige was a nervous wreck, triple-checking inventory lists and fretting over frosting consistency. I was her comm anchor, managing our new social media accounts, organizing the workflow for the big day, and handling the logistics. We were a well-oiled machine, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline. The morning of the opening, a line had already formed down the block before we even unlocked the doors. When we did, the small shop was instantly filled with a warm, bustling crowd of family, friends, and curious locals drawn in by the smell of fresh bread and coffee. The energy was electric. I was stationed near the front, greeting people, helping Paige's new part-time cashier with the register, and just soaking it all in. I saw my parents beaming with pride, my friends marveling at the transformation of the space, and strangers' faces lighting up as they took their first bite of a flaky croissant. I felt a sense of fulfillment so deep and pure it was almost overwhelming. This was real. We had built this. Around noon, during the peak of the rush, the bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see Sloane standing there. She looked completely out of place. While everyone else was in casual weekend attire, she was dressed in the sharp, professional clothes she must have worn to a Saturday morning hospital meeting. She clutched her purse like a shield, her eyes wide as she took in the chaotic scene. She had managed to clear her schedule, a grand gesture in her world, and had come expecting, I can only assume, to be treated as the guest of honor. Instead, she was just another customer in a crowded room. Our eyes met across the shop. I was genuinely surprised to see her. "Sloane," I called out, weaving my way through the crowd. "You made it. This is crazy, right?" I was happy to see her, but it was the distracted, buoyant happiness of a host at a successful party. I gave her a quick, flower-dusted hug before one of the new employees pulled me away. "Zane, the credit card machine is out of paper." "Be right back," I said over my shoulder and rushed off to deal with the minor crisis. I left her standing alone by the door, an island of stillness in a sea of celebratory motion. I saw her a few moments later, awkwardly holding a small cup of coffee, looking lost. Several people, friends of mine she'd met before, came up to congratulate me, clapping me on the back, talking about what an amazing thing I had done here with Paige. Sloane stood on the periphery of these conversations, a silent observer to a life she didn't recognize. That night the exhaustion finally hit me. The opening had been a resounding success, far beyond our wildest dreams. After cleaning up and closing down, I went back to the apartment to grab a few things before heading to a small celebration dinner with Paige and our parents. I walked in to find Sloane waiting for me, her arms crossed, her face a thunderous mask. The air in the room was cold and tense. "What was that today?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "What was what? The opening? It was incredible. We sold out of almost everything." I was still riding the high of the day, and it took me a moment to register her anger. "No, Zane, that," she said, gesturing vaguely. "All of it. Business partner, people I've known for years congratulating you like you're some kind of entrepreneur. When did this stop being a little project you were helping your sister with?" The accusations poured out of her, a torrent of confusion and resentment. "You're never home anymore, we don't talk. I finally clear an entire weekend for us, and I show up to find that you've built this other life without even telling me." I listened, letting her vent. The old me would have been defensive or maybe even apologetic, but I wasn't the old me anymore. I was tired, yes, but I was also grounded in a way I hadn't been before. When she finally ran out of steam, I looked at her, my own expression calm. "I did tell you, Sloane," I said, my voice even. "I told you months ago that I was working on this with Paige. I told you about the grant, the storefront, the construction. You just weren't listening." "I was busy," she shot back. "I have a demanding career, in case you forgot." "I have never, not for one second, forgotten how demanding your career is," I replied, and there was no heat in my words, only a profound sadness. "But that doesn't change the facts. You want to know when this stopped being a little project? It was the moment you told me I wasn't your priority. I heard you, I believed you, so I found somewhere I could be." I saw the memory of that evening flicker in her eyes. The night I'd planned dinner, the candles, her dismissal. "You said that was okay," she insisted, her voice rising. "You said you understood." "I did understand," I said, taking a step closer. "I understood perfectly. You showed me exactly where I stood in your life. I was something to be dealt with later when you had the time. You told me to let you focus on your career, and I did. I got out of your way. This," I said, gesturing around the apartment that no longer felt like my home, "this is what that looks like. I built something because you were busy building something else. I don't understand why you're angry with me for that." Tears of frustration welled in her eyes. "Because I'm your girlfriend," she cried out, the words laced with a desperate, possessive pain. "I should always be your priority. That's how it's supposed to work." I looked at her, at this brilliant, driven, and unbelievably blind woman, and I delivered the final, quiet truth. "Priorities aren't titles, Sloane, they're actions. You showed me Yura. CDONs every single day for 2 years. All I did was finally start showing you mine." The fight went out of her. Her shoulders slumped, and the anger on her face crumbled into raw, undisguised hurt. The silence that fell between us was the sound of a final, definitive end. She had hit the wall she couldn't see, the one she had unknowingly built brick by brick with every canceled date, every distracted conversation, every casual dismissal. And now she was finally seeing the consequences of her own design. The argument left us in a quiet, desolate stalemate. There was nothing left to yell about. All the truths had been laid bare on the cold floor between us. Sloane didn't try to defend herself further. She just stood there, tears silently streaming down her face as the full weight of my words settled upon her. It was the devastating, dawning comprehension of someone realizing they had misplaced something priceless, only to find it gone for good when they finally went back to look for it. She hadn't just lost my time, she had lost my investment, my partnership, my unwavering belief in us. She had let the man who would have done anything for her wither from neglect, all because she couldn't find it in herself to offer him a single evening of her undivided attention. A week later, I moved out. The decision wasn't made in anger. It was the logical, inevitable conclusion to the path we were on. The process was quiet and civil. We divided our shared belongings with a sad, bureaucratic efficiency. I packed up my clothes, my books, and the computer that had witnessed the slow decay of our love story. As I carried the last box out the door, I looked back at Sloane. She was sitting on the couch, the same couch where she had delivered the fateful line, looking small and lost in a home that now felt cavernously empty. There was no anger left in me, only a deep, melancholic ache for the 5 years we'd shared and the future we had lost. I found a small apartment a few blocks from the rolling pin. My new life quickly took shape. I divided my time between my freelance work, which was flourishing, and my role as a partner at the bakery. The shop was a runaway success. We were building a community, not just a customer base. I loved the rhythm of it, the early mornings, the smell of fresh coffee, the easy camaraderie with Paige and our staff, the satisfaction of seeing our hard work pay off. I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. The hollowness that had been my constant companion for 2 years was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging. I didn't cut Sloane out of my life completely, but the nature of our contact changed. It was limited to occasional polite texts about forwarding mail or tying up loose financial ends. A few months after I left, I started hearing things through our mutual friends. Sloane was thriving in her residency. She was on track to become a star, just as she'd always planned. But she was also deeply, profoundly lonely. The apartment that had once been her quiet sanctuary from work had become a silent prison. Her friends said she was starting to understand what she had thrown away. The calls started about 6 months after the breakup. They were always late at night when her exhaustion and loneliness likely peaked. I never answered, but she would leave long, rambling voicemails. "Zane, it's me," one began, her voice thick with emotion. "I was just thinking about that trip we took to the coast, remember? Before all this, before I got so lost in my work, I miss that. I miss us, I'm sorry. I know I am. I'm willing to make time now. I can make time. We can fix this." I would listen to the messages, a knot of sadness tightening in my chest. I felt for her, I truly did. I didn't doubt her sincerity or her pain, but her realization had come too late. She was offering to water a garden that had already been uprooted and moved to more fertile soil. She wanted to prioritize me now that her other priorities were sorted, but my life was no longer structured to accommodate her. I was no longer the man waiting by the phone. I'm not bitter, I understand her ambition, the incredible pressure she was under. In a way, she did me a favor. She showed me my own worth by demonstrating how little she valued it. She taught me that you cannot force yourself onto someone's list of priorities. You can't beg and plead your way into their heart. You can only control your own actions, your own energy, your own investments. I had been investing everything in a partnership that had ceased to exist. When I finally stopped, I was free to invest in my sister, in a dream, and ultimately in myself. I chose to build a table with someone who wanted to build it with me, instead of waiting for scraps from someone else. So to anyone out there who feels like an option instead of a priority, who feels like their love and support is being taken for granted, listen closely to what people's actions are telling you. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to quietly say, "That's okay," and then turn around and make yourself your own priority. You might be surprised by the beautiful things you can build when you're no longer waiting for someone else's permission to start.